Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Um, I don't know how many of you were at DrupalCon Denver, but one of the keynotes from DrupalCon Denver was Mitchell Baker. So she's the chairperson of the Mozilla Foundation, and one of the things she spoke about was a new sign-in technology called Persona. And one of the main advantages of this is that when you sign in with Persona, the website you're signing into never gets to see your password. So there's a lot of advantages to that. So I wanted to use this myself. So I'm a Drupal developer, so I wanted to see what Drupal modules there were. So I found one module, first of all, called Browser ID, which is the old name for Persona, and it also implemented the older protocol. And then I found another module called Persona that used the new name. It used the new protocol. So that was great, but I had a look at the module and I basically wanted to rearrange a lot of things. So I started submitting patches, and I think the maintainer got so fed up with me submitting so many patches that he gave me commit access to the module. And then I just ran with that and made a huge number of changes. And I think the module is now very, very stable. So I joined the mailing list for Mozilla Identity and told them about the module, got talking to them. And Dan, he is the project lead for the Persona project. He sent me the T-shirt for Persona. And then I suggested that he should come to DrupalCon and tell us all about Mozilla Persona. So if we can all give a very warm Drupal welcome to Dan Callahan.
Thank you. It was great. I get this email from Johnny saying, "Oh, I've got this talk submission in for DrupalCon. You should totally come by." Oh yeah, sure. He's like, "Well, you'll give the first half of the talk," and oh, so here I am. That's clearly the way to do it. Get a talk accepted, then get somebody else to do it. Pro tip right there. So I'm here to talk about how we as a community, we the Drupal community, are going to kill the password on the internet, and the way we're going to do that, I hope, is with Mozilla Persona. Persona is a login system. It replaces emails and password forms. It replaces social auth on your own website. And it works on the basis of verifying email addresses. Let me show you what it looks like. So I've recorded a screencast of me logging into a few websites using Persona. I'm going to start with Raygun.io, which is an production application error tracking app. I'm given an option of logging in with an email and password or a number of different protocols or other methods. I'm going to click on Persona, and when I click there, my browser prompts me to enter an email address. I can enter any email address I want, and in this case, I'm going to use my work address, dcallahan@mozilla.com. And when I click Next, you'll see very briefly the dialog says, checking with your email provider. So it's going and looking at mozilla.com, and it finds that mozilla.com understands the Persona protocol, because we eat our own dog food. And I get forwarded on to a login page specifically for me to log into my corporate account. It's hosted by Mozilla. I type in my normal LDAP password just as if I was logging into webmail at work. I hit sign in, my email address has been verified, and I'm logged into Raygun. Now that I've logged into a site once, now that my browser knows who I am, when I go to other websites and click sign in, if they use Persona, notice that my email address is already pre-filled. My browser now knows who I am, so it only takes me 2 clicks to log into additional websites. 1, to open the email picker, and 2, to confirm that I actually want to sign into that website. After I've used Persona once, I'm never more than 2 clicks away from logging into another website, even if I've never visited that site before. Of course, we understand that people have different identities online. Me at work is not the same as me at home. And so if I want to use my Gmail address to log into my Open Badges backpack, I can simply click the Add Another Address button, type in dancallahan@gmail.com, And when I click Add, just like my Mozilla address sent me to Mozilla to authenticate, a Gmail address sends me to Google to authenticate. One additional click, and I'm signed in. So I've signed into 3 sites with a total of 7 clicks. It's very, very simple, very, very easy, very low friction. And none of these sites are receiving a password. None of these sites receive any sort of secret that they have to worry about storing and securing. So now when I go to another website, Ting, which is a mobile phone service provider in the US.
Was Gmail running a special service? Or?
The question is, was Gmail running a special service? Sorry, pause the screencast when it's mid-load. To support Persona? I'll answer that in just a minute. But now my browser's seen 2 identities of mine, my Gmail address and my work address. And so I'm given this picker where I can very simply choose. I could add a 3rd address if I wanted to, or a 4th. If I can choose one, click sign in, even if I've never previously used that site. So that's the way Persona works. It's very, very simple, very, very easy to use. Of course, I demoed that in Firefox. Mozilla understands that the web is bigger than any one browser, it's bigger than any one email provider, and it's bigger than any one social network. So Persona today works with any email address on any major browser. Everything from mobile Safari or Chrome on iOS out to pretty much any browser on Android, Internet Explorer 8 and up work great with Persona. And what you effectively get is a button that lets you sign users into your site with their email address, but without you having to worry about storing, receiving, touching passwords at all. Because when you put Persona behind that button, Persona intelligently routes your users to an appropriate login endpoint. For Mozilla users, for Mozilla employees, we go log in against our corporate LDAP server. For Gmail users, they log in against Google, Yahoo against Yahoo, and it only gets better. So you implement Persona once, and you already have a strict superset of all of these social providers. And any domain at any time can advertise support for Persona and immediately start receiving users and having people directed to it. Of course, if you use an address, say your own corporate address that doesn't support Persona, Persona is configured to fall back to a normal email challenge. So we send you a link, you click on it, you've proven your address, done. So the same sort of thing that you would have to implement yourself if you wanted to support any email address, Persona does by default. But for domains that support it, users have an enhanced, smoother flow that works with their existing authentication endpoints. Of course, like everything Mozilla does, Persona is open source, and like the web itself, it's decentralized. We're not trying to get between you and your users. We're trying to define a protocol that the browser itself can use to figure out how and where to authenticate you. So today, Persona exists as a web service. Today, Persona is a reference implementation of a protocol, but our ambitions are much more audacious. We want Persona to become the next standard for authentication on the web. We want Persona to be baked into browsers, and we're going to start leading in that direction early next year when we start building Persona into Firefox directly. Firefox. Why does a browser vendor, why does Mozilla care about passwords? Why are we trying to address login? So though Mozilla is best known for building Firefox, we're a nonprofit. We're a global community, just like the Drupal community, representing tens of thousands of volunteer contributors all over the world. We exist to make sure that the web remains an open and accessible and interoperable place that's built on standards, not solely controlled by advertising firms. The Mozilla Foundation, the nonprofit that shepherds the direction of the Mozilla projects, codifies its work in the Mozilla Manifesto, a 10-point manifesto of the open web. This was developed at the height of the browser wars when the Internet Explorer Netscape divide threatened to split the internet into mutually incompatible realms. But some of these points, number 2, that the internet is a global public resource that must remain open and accessible, apply much more broadly than just to browsers. Number 4, individual security on the internet is fundamental and cannot be taken for granted, or cannot be treated as optional. Number 5, individuals must have the ability to shape their own experiences on the internet. Each one of these points, each one of these bullets in our manifesto apply equally to the browser wars as they do to identity. Each one of these is facing a grave threat. Social authentication threatens to split the internet and close it off, completely eliminate the ability for certain classes of people to access entire classes of websites. If you live in a country that blocks Facebook, you cannot log into a site that uses Facebook Connect. Furthermore, social auth robs users of the ability to choose who they trust, who they are, and how they represent themselves on the internet. And passwords, security. It is extremely difficult to do security correctly. Is there a question in the back?
Yeah, real briefly, what about countries blocking Mozilla?
So what about countries blocking Mozilla? Part of that comes into the idea of Persona being decentralized. So there is no necessary point that flows through Mozilla. I'll discuss the protocol at the end of the talk. So yeah, if you have further questions, please feel free to raise your hand or bring those up whenever. So let's look at where we've come. Authentication is hard. Authentication is really hard. This is what a login screen looked like 25 years ago. And you can recognize it as a login screen because it has an email address and a password field. What's my user ID at Prodigy? What's my password? And a sign-in button. Here's the login screen today. You can recognize it as a login screen because it has those same two fields. So the way that we've logged into websites, the way that we authenticate on the internet has not changed meaningfully in a quarter century. But what has changed is the frequency and the quantity of sites that we log into. Passwords are a pain. Passwords are fatiguing, they're difficult to use, and we're using them more. So what are our alternatives? Some sites, like Strava, have started offering something like a Facebook Connect button or a Google button. This is nice from a user experience standpoint. If I'm willing to use Facebook, I don't have to worry about passwords, but it changes the authentication question into one of not do I want to log into Strava, but it turns it into a trust question. Do I trust Strava to act responsibly with the information that I am forced to disclose as part of logging in with Facebook? Do I trust them with my social graph? Do I trust them with my name, my photo, my list of friends? And I'm only given the option of Facebook. If I wanted to log in with my Gmail address, I would have to, again, shoulder the burden of managing a password. And I'd have to hope that Strava does the right thing and stores that password using an appropriate hashing function, using appropriate salting, using appropriate work factors. And I can't be sure of that, just like they can't be sure that I choose a strong password. So what do? I don't have choice here. I don't have meaningful choice. Stack Overflow just adds more buttons. So I can choose Google, I can choose Yahoo, I can choose Facebook. There are literally a dozen buttons on this page. When I started giving this talk, there were 13. The button on the kind of far bottom left, the little green circle with an eye in it, that's My OpenID. That's shutting down, I believe, in February of next year. So soon this will be 11 buttons, which is a problem. But how do I even pick a button? I have an account literally with every single one of these providers. How do I pick the right one? And how do I pick the same one when I come back 2 weeks later, 2 months later, 2 years later? But it's more than a user experience problem. Social auth, you're only providing users options that you yourself select. There's only a whitelist that each site will select. So if I wanted to log into Stack Overflow using my GitHub account or using my Twitter account, I don't have that option. I have to choose between one of those pre-selected services. And when you suggest that your users, when you force your users to log in with something like Google Plus or Facebook, you're saying that you as a site owner, as a site builder, accept the fact that you're going to be phoning home to a for-profit corporation half a world away and asking for permission to talk to your own users. It means that you're fine with things like a real name policy that Google Plus and Facebook have, that you have to use your real name. And if your real name is insufficiently Western, that you have to provide paperwork to prove that it is your name, or they will kick you out. It appears that your name does not comply with the Google Plus real name policy or Google Plus names policy. It will be suspended until you edit your name to comply or appeal with additional information. Social auth means you're accepting imposing the whims of third-party terms of service on your users and accepting the fact that if your users get banned from Google Plus or banned from Facebook, that you're fine with them being unable to access your own site. But maybe it's worth it to get rid of passwords. Social auth does get rid of passwords quite well. But it shouldn't have to mean giving up privacy. Who remembers getting this email? Oh, at least one hand. Yeah. That was unfortunate. For those of you that are not familiar with the issue, on page 42 of the Drupal Watchdog magazine that you got in your swag bag, Holly Ross discusses Drupal.org's response, the Drupal Association's response to the Drupal.org compromise. Under the heading, The Immediate Aftermath, she writes, "We were very fortunate that members of the Drupal security team were on hand, along with the Drupal.org infrastructure team and Oregon State University's open source lab, to diagnose the severity of the problem, mitigate the issues technically, and work with Drupal Association staff to formulate and implement a public response. The team went to work immediately to determine the scope and severity of the issue. They took down non-essential sites. They combed logs for more information, searched file uploads for anything suspicious, checked the integrity of project downloads. The infrastructure team started rebuilding servers that had been affected. The team also deployed PHPass password hashing, removed admin access for non-active users, and then with all of that done, the scope and the breach identified, the next step was to execute the password reset." Are you sitting or do you have a question? So that is an absolutely exemplary response. The Drupal Association brought to bear an amazing team quickly, competently, and effectively to mitigate the loss of the Drupal.org account database. Unfortunately, I don't know about you, but I don't think this generalizes. I don't think most people have time or resources or money or even the awareness to properly respond to an event like that, to a compromise like that. And so not only is it challenging to do that, if you're managing a couple dozen sites, how do you do this for each one? How do you even know when a site gets compromised? It's also a problem because about the best password policy you can hope your users have is that book right there. If your users are writing down their passwords, they are well better than most people on the internet today. Most people on the internet memorize 3, maybe 4 passwords, and maybe have slight variations from site to site. Which means that when Drupal.org was compromised, sure, that database leaked, but it leaked in a way that allowed most, or at least many of the passwords to be reversed out of their hash, which put users at risk at every other site where they had reused that same password. And so even though Drupal.org did the right thing in resetting passwords and making people come up with new ones, it still leaves countless people at risk on countless other websites, and there is nothing that you as a site owner, and there's nothing that you as a user can do to mitigate this. You have to know that a site got breached. A lot of sites aren't as forthcoming about what happens. And what about you as a site owner? Even if you're doing everything right, you're using scrypt, using per user salts, you have an appropriate work factor, you're storing an additional salt outside of the database that the application uses. None of that matters if someone is able to learn the plain text of your user's passwords through another source. There is no way to win with passwords. So what can you do? I hope that using Mozilla Persona is one of the things that you consider on the next site you build. If Drupal.org had been using Persona, there would have never been anything derived from a password to steal in the first place. That breach could not have resulted in the collateral damage that it did. So how's it work? I've told you that Persona gets rid of passwords. I've told you that Mozilla doesn't want to be a part of this. Mozilla doesn't want to be in the middle of you and your users. But what's actually going on? In any login transaction, there are 3 parties: your browser, your email provider, and the site that you want to log into. The first thing your browser does, we're using completely standard public key crypto. Your browser generates a public-private key pair and presents the public key to the email provider and asks them to sign a proof of identity. It says, "Hey Gmail, can you please certify that I really am who I say I am?" And if so, you get a signed certificate back. The browser stores that, and it can then present that certificate to websites as a proof of identity. Of course, that website has to verify that the certificate is legitimate. So much like if someone showed you a driver's license, you have to check to make sure it has the right holograms, to make sure that it's not some cheap forgery. So the website requests the public key from the email provider, verifies the cryptographic signatures, and if it all checks out, they can sign the user in. They never have to store a secret, never have to store a password. The nice thing is, once the browser has a valid certificate, until that certificate expires, that user can log into as many sites as they want without having to go and talk to their email provider again. What's more, the email providers can cache the public keys that they get, which means that sometimes the email provider doesn't have to be contacted at all during a login transaction. Even when the email provider is contacted, Persona never reveals, the protocol never reveals who you are, who's trying to sign in. All that the email provider learns is that one of my users has tried to sign into this site, but they don't have a way to figure out who. So it's much more privacy protecting than social auth, than OpenID, and it's actually extremely easy to implement. But it relies on all three parties understanding and implementing the Persona protocol. If the browser doesn't support Persona, no problem. We have a polyfill. We have a JavaScript shim. You include it in your page. It works on any browser. If the email provider doesn't support Persona, and this is how we're able to claim that Persona supports any email address today, the browser will still do the first same step. It'll say, hey, email provider, can you please vouch for me? But that'll fail because the email provider doesn't understand the protocol. As a convention, Mozilla can step in and verify people for you. So the browser will try that same request, but it'll go to Mozilla and say, hey, Mozilla, can you vouch for me until my email provider can do it themselves? At which point, Mozilla sends an email to that user. They click on the link, proving to Mozilla their identity, and then Mozilla signs a certificate. Same flow repeats. User presents the certificate to the site. The site tries to request the public key from the actual email provider. So we try the decentralized path first. We try to keep Mozilla out of the loop. And if that fails, then the site can opt to fall back and check Mozilla's key. And if everything checks out then, if the site trusts and believes in Mozilla, then the user can be logged in. If at any point a domain stands up and says, I can vouch for my own users now, and that's as simple as publishing a JSON document on the root of your domain, Mozilla immediately drops out of the picture automatically. We have carefully designed this protocol not to be something that puts us in the middle of your login transactions, but to be something that any individual part of it can immediately and automatically be replaced by a decentralized alternative as soon as that becomes available without any additional configuration, without any additional work on behalf of site owners or browsers. 4 steps. Can you please certify my identity? Thank you. Here's the proof. Site verifies it. What we've built is we've built truly friendly public key cryptography. It's dead simple both for users and developers. You saw what it looked like for users. Jonathan can tell you about the Drupal module. Looks like there's a question in the back. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the question is the logic of the pop-up window, is that on Mozilla's site? It is right now. Persona is implemented as a JavaScript API. And so the plan is in the future, browsers will have a native implementation of that API in the same way that you have a geolocation API. And for now, we provide a JavaScript shim that uses persona.org to provide the UI. But if you're using a browser that has built-in support, all of that interface will be hosted directly by your local browser. So that's one of the other things that we built so that you can just very, very automatically and easily. Does navigator.id exist? Yes? Okay, ignore everything at persona.org. Use the native browser's parts. We're trying to write ourselves out of the protocol. And so we can work without browser support. We can work without support from email providers. We have polyfills. We have a fallback. What we cannot do, and this is where the Drupal community comes in, this is why it's so important that the Drupal community support Persona, is that we can't force websites to accept this credential. We can't force websites to leave passwords behind. And so it's incumbent on everyone in this room, if you believe the open web deserves better, then start with yourself. Use Persona on your own site, spread the word, let Mozilla know, let me know what we can do better. Persona is still in beta. We're responsive. We're very interested in building what is right for the web, and we can't do that alone. We can only do that with the feedback and the input from communities like this one. So that's Persona at a high level. I'm going to pass things off to Johnny so we can demo how the Drupal module works. I'll take one question real quick.
Yeah. How do you invalidate the password that is stored in the browser itself? So how do you, like, let's say you log in a browser with your friend and then you forget to log out, and then your friend can always use your credentials whenever.
Right. So the question is, how do you invalidate, once you've signed into a website once using Persona, how do you invalidate your browser's knowledge of your identity? When you sign into the website, you receive an identity certificate that is time limited. It never lasts for more than a day. It usually lasts for closer to 1 hour the first time you use Persona, extending up to around 6 hours as you continue using it. And so if nothing else, even if you walk away from the computer, several hours later the certificate expires, and if someone wanted to use that machine, they would then be prompted to log into your email again. So as long as you're signed out of your email, it takes care of itself based on just expiration. Right. So if you're logged into Google and your Persona certificate expires, but you still have an active session with Google, the browser can automatically go and get a new one without any user interaction. So it's designed to automatically extend. And unlike many public key-based identity solutions or crypto solutions like PGP, where the root of your identity is within this key pair that you have to guard and keep secret and synchronize, with Persona, the root of your identity is with your email provider. So with any domain that you choose, that's where your identity is. And by logging in there, you can automatically receive additional certificates, additional proofs of identity. Any other quick questions before we bounce over to the Drupal demo? So the question is, does Persona actually generate the key pair for the user, or how does that work? So Persona depends on a pretty decent JavaScript implementation because we actually do generate a public-private key pair locally in the browser using JavaScript. And so as a user, the key pair you're using never leaves your local machine. You present the pub key to the email provider, they sign that, and then again locally your browser stores the certificate. The core difference between Persona and something like OpenID is that we presume that the browser is an active participant in the login process and is able to actually do computation, which allows us to build some really interesting privacy-preserving features into Persona. Yeah. The question is, do we see this being implemented in the operating system level or just an environment outside of the browser at any point? Not necessarily. We're very narrowly scoped in trying to solve authentication on the web when humans are in the loop. So Persona is also not great if you're doing something that's API-centric. But you could take something like the route that Amazon does where you sign into a website as a human using something like Persona and then receive an API key for that sort of access. But as far as building into the browser or into the operating system, not necessarily. We have built it into Firefox OS. So if you have a Firefox OS phone that has a native implementation of Persona right on board, but that's kind of blurring the lines because Firefox OS is itself effectively just a browser. Cool.
And we'll have a full question and answer section at the end.
Yeah, so Drupal demo, and then happy to take more questions. Also, I have stickers up front, so at the end of the talk, please come by and grab some. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so now for the live demo. Okay, so this is the project page for the module. So that's just drupal.org/project/persona. And I've created a demo site. So this is just a very simple Drupal installation, and it has Persona installed. So I'm just going to sign in just to show you how it works. So we can sign in. It already knows my email address. I'm going to add another one. So it's going to check yahoo.com. Mozilla have implemented a connection with Yahoo. So if I want to sign in, I can just type in my Yahoo password. So that quickly, I was able to sign in to the website. Okay, so I have a couple of other example sites. So this is my my personal blog, and of course, if you've got a blog, you don't necessarily want to enable anonymous commenting because then you can get a lot of spam. But if you require people to sign into your blog in order to post, that's quite a high barrier to entry. So on my blog, I've enabled Persona. So again, I can sign in. And as easy as that, I can start commenting. So in the Drupal community, we have a lot of really great e-commerce solutions. So one of those is the commerce module, and there is a distribution called Commerce Kickstart. This is a stock install of Commerce Kickstart, and then I've added the Persona module. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to use Persona in an e-commerce setting. Okay, so let's find a product that I want to buy. I'm going to buy this water bottle. Add to cart. Go to checkout. And then before I complete the transaction, I just want to sign in, just so they have my email address. So I click sign in. And select my email. And that quickly, I'm signed in, and Drupal Commerce is smart enough, so it's transferred my cart into the new session. And then I can go to checkout. So I think you can really optimize your funnel if you use Persona. Okay, so this is a stock Drupal 7 installation. So I'm just going to install the module and then show you what it's capable of. So you download the module in the regular fashion. Enable the module. And the module is set up so by default it puts the sign-in button into the header region in your theme. So if I sign out, we now have a Persona sign-in button. So I'm going to sign in. My admin account on this website uses my jbrown@bluedroplet.com email, so I can just sign in. And it's that simple. So the Persona module, it actually it looks at your Drupal user account settings. So Drupal can be configured to only allow administrators to create accounts, or you can allow visitors to create accounts on your website. So the Persona module just looks at this setting. So if you allow visitors to sign in, then if a new user comes to your website with Persona to sign in, then their site on the Drupal website is just created transparently. And this is the settings page for the module. So the first setting is set Persona as the only sign-in method. So by default, the module allows you to use Drupal standard sign-in methods or Persona, and you can switch between those, and that's fine. If you enable this option, then it disables the sign-in blocks, disables the menu routes, and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So if I sign out, having enabled that option, the sign-in dialog is gone. You can, if you just go to the user URL, you can also sign in there. Or you should be able to. I don't know. Ah, invalid background color. Okay. I can fix this in a moment. Okay, so I've re-enabled the module. I will explain. So there is a setting where you can configure the background color. So I think it's just a problem with this form. It just wasn't storing the value correctly. But I think if I actually specify the color, then that should work fine. So there's a number of options that control the appearance of the sign-in dialog. So you can specify a logo. The only requirement is that the logo has to be served over HTTPS because the sign-in dialog itself is served over HTTPS. You can configure the background color, and then you can provide links to terms of service and privacy policy. So hopefully now that I've defined the background color, we should get a background color. Yep. So it's working.
So again, the beautiful thing about open source is that this is an opportunity for anyone in this room to fix the bug with the background color not being initialized in the module by default.
So there's a few other options in the module. So what happens if someone signs into your website for the first time? What is their username? So because the account is created automatically, the username is automatically generated. So by default, it just takes the start of your email address as your username. But it may be maybe you just want to use email addresses for usernames, in which case you can just enable this option. You can specify it so whenever a user signs in for the first time, they are redirected to the account edit page so they can fill out their profile. And in a moment, I'll show you some advanced workflows for that, so you can actually enforce that when someone signs in for the first time, they have to complete their profile before they can do anything else. You can change the styling of the button. So if you just set it to button, this is just a regular button HTML element. You can theme that however you like. Persona gives you the persona style button. Or if you select form, then the button is just rendered in the same way as any button on a form on your website. Yep. And it was very easy to implement that, just a couple of lines in the form. It is translated. So there is a module, I think it's called string overrides. So you can change it there. Okay. So there is an advanced workflow using the rules module. So I just created a couple of rules. So it may be when someone signs in for the first time, you don't want them to be able to do anything until they've completed their profile. So just by creating a couple of rules, I was able to do that. So whenever they complete their profile, they get given a new user role. So you can have a role called registered. So instead of giving all of the permissions to the authenticated user role, you might want to have the same permissions for authenticated user as anonymous user, but then have a registered role and then give all the additional permissions to that role. So the role then, it gives you the registered role, it gives you a message, thanks for registering, and then redirects you to the front page of the website. This role just checks, so whenever Drupal is initializing, if you have the authenticated user role, but you don't have the registered role, then it just redirects you to your user edit page. So I'll just show you a demo of that. So let's sign out and sign in as a new user. So there is no user on this website with this email address. So we've been redirected to the edit page. So we have to complete our profile. So all being well, if I try to go anywhere else on the website, I am redirected to the edit profile page. And this date of birth field is actually a required field. So if I try to save the form, I can't do that until I've entered all of the required information. So if I enable the takeover option, that form actually, those form items actually disappear.
And is there any notion that the Persona protocol will let you transfer additional information, like the full name of the person and the avatar and stuff like that?
So the question is, will Persona eventually support transferring profile attributes like a full name or a photo for the users? Right now, we're very, very directly focused solely on proving email addresses and letting sites collect whatever additional information they need. So we suggest a two-phase if you need some of that information, if you absolutely require two-phase auth process where the user signs in with Persona and then you present them with a minimal sign-up form that just asks for that additional information. The nice thing about that is that you can you have an intermediate point in your funnel bringing users into your site. So if people hit that form and then bail out, you still captured their email address and are able to ask them what was up and maybe retain some of those users. But right now, just for user experience reasons, Persona is really concerned with replacing passwords and not much else.
So just coming back to your previous point, I'm just going to enable the takeover sign-in option and show you what happens to the form. Okay, so if I enable set persona as the only sign-in method, and then I switch to the other user, if I try to edit my account, there's no password field. So one other thing I'm just going to demo is what happens if you have an account on a Drupal website and then you want to change your email address for that account. So I've added some functionality to the module for that. So I'll just delete this user. Perhaps I created it by accident. I actually want this email address to be the administrator email address. So I can go to my account. Just on my user page, there's a change email button, so I can just click on that, select my other email address, and all being well, that should become my email address for this account on this Drupal website. The username is only populated whenever you create the account, actually. And it's now insisting that I create my profile.
The module could choose to change the username.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the changing email, didn't actually work, but we can fix that. Okay, so that's the end of the demo. So I just wanted to give you some takeaways. So whenever you create a new Drupal website, maybe Persona should be the first module that you install after you've installed Drupal. In the Drupal community, we also have a lot of distributions. So every time there's a DrupalCon or a Drupal camp, there's a distribution called COD, which is used. So it'd be really wonderful if the Persona module was in COD, and then anytime you're signing up for a Drupal event, you could just sign in very easily. There's also Drupal Commerce. There's Drupal Commons, and also Commerce Kickstart. So if you're interested in using Persona, maybe you should talk to the people who are responsible for these distributions and kindly ask that they enable Persona by default. And also, if you're building a website for a client, maybe you should tell them about Persona and just ask if they want to use Persona for their website. Okay, so I think we're going to have a question and answer session.
Yeah, so I think we have about 10 minutes to do Q&A. One thing to note before we go into that is don't forget to go and fill out the survey about what you thought about this presentation, so that we can get some feedback on, what the right message is for the Drupal community. But I'm happy to take questions. Yeah.
Well, it was kind of like the gentleman's question here. We've got, when you're, I think we found ourselves like, this is a really amazing thing. I think this could change so much on the web. But while we've done the social login stuff, we've also had an issue where people have quite liked the fact that it brings profile information and brings all the other stuff. Sorry. Because of the social logins that we're used to, we're also used as both website users and also website creators as relying on some of this profile information, the fact that it fills out people's avatars, fills out all sorts of things. How can we persuade clients or the people we work for or users themselves that maybe, or even the companies like Facebook or Google, that we should have this two-step process where login should be like a key to the front door, and then maybe afterwards you fill in your profile information, which should be separate. But I think that's going to be a really tough argument to make when all the websites we've been making for the past few years have always relied on taking that Facebook information, taking all the other stuff out of it. So yeah, what do we do to make sure this is actually taken up as a standard for that?
So you're still presuming that you're actually getting users through your funnel, that people aren't seeing the Facebook and seeing the fact that it makes it a trust question and backing away. And there's nothing wrong with having authentication with Persona and then asking users to authorize a social account to pull in additional profile data. Airbnb does effectively that. You log in with an email and password, but then you can connect your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Twitter accounts. Something you can do is obviously you can use something like Gravatar to pull images for user email addresses, because you get an email address. There's no lock-in with Persona. You can use your existing user database. You can move to Persona very easily. You can move away from Persona easily. You have email addresses, portable. Slablog.io is a blogging platform by this guy out in Germany. And if I sign into that with something that they've never seen before, have you ever signed into Slablog?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. So I'll use one of Jonathan's addresses. Drupal Nomad at Yahoo. When I sign in, it goes and verifies with Yahoo that I still have an active session. So if Jonathan was signed out of Yahoo, this goes back to the earlier question about sessions. If he had signed out of Yahoo in the interim, that would have failed and it would have asked him to type in his password again. And so Slablog's like, well, wait a second. I've never seen you before. It looks like you haven't used this address yet. Please pick a username. And it's pre-filled a suggested username based on the email address. A lot of email addresses take the form of first name dot last name. The Discourse platform, it's Jeff Atwood's new startup, does the same sort of thing where it tries to intelligently guess if there is one dot in the email address, split that, capitalize the two words, and suggest that as the full name. So there are things you can do to provide sane defaults and then just give your users a chance to confirm and continue. But if you really rely on deep profile data, if that's crucial to your business and capturing it at signup is crucial, Persona may not be the right solution. Other questions?
We touched on it earlier, but with the sort of questions in the middle, if you are logged into various sites using Persona, and then you want to give the computer to someone else immediately, how can you make sure they don't have access to your user accounts on those sites?
So if you want to hand your computer over to someone
Yeah, 'cause
immediately,
you mentioned signing out being it would time out automatically, but if you know that the timeout's not going to be enough, is there a central logout function?
there is. You can. So when this is built into the browser, you will have a sign out button in the browser that will immediately invalidate everything. If you, in a Persona dialog, click "This is not me," that will also immediately trash all of your certificates and force a revalidation. We have data from Google about shared devices, and effectively computers, people like the internet cafe scenario is something that people also are concerned about. And we start by issuing very, very short duration certificates for that reason. But we have evidence that when computers are shared or used by multiple people, they are almost always shared amongst known individuals and trusted individuals.
And if you're in if you're in an internet cafe, then quite often the computer will actually reboot between users.
I'm thinking also people posting funny things on Facebook walls when on the wrong account.
Yeah, lock your machine. It's physical security. Yeah.
You're saying in hostels you have often shared computers and they're not rebooted and nothing happens. No security updates and nothing.
Yeah, so there are bad machines out there that don't reboot between users. From a study of logins happening to Gmail, which is a very large N study, the shared computer use case, the bad shared computer use case is practically non-existent, which is highly counterintuitive, but it's apparently very, very rare.
One question on the user interface. So currently in the current implementation, the reference implementation, it comes out as a pop-up. Is that how you see this being implemented going forward regardless, or could it also be, say, form fields on the site itself if it wasn't hosted by Mozilla? So can we remove an extra step in terms of the flow? And I'll ask my second question in a second.
Sure. So we're not entirely certain what the user experience will be when it's baked into the browser. The kind of default that people reach for are drop-down panels, little door hangers, kind of like the security dialog. But given that we have to host the login page, and so Persona doesn't specify at all how you authenticate. So a Mozilla user will log in using our LDAP password, a Mozilla employee. A Gmail user will log in using Google's OAuth kind of authorization screen, including a two-factor prompt. We don't dictate how the email providers do authentication. It has to be pretty flexible, and so it's likely that it'll be a door hanger or an overlay or something in that vein. As far as capturing things on the site, we are about to extend the API to allow the site to pass into the dialog the user's chosen email address. So you could prompt the user for an email address on your site, and when they click sign in, it would already be pre-filled in the Persona dialog, and they just have to authorize it.
Does the login page have to be hosted at Mozilla always? Is that part of the protocol?
No.
No, okay.
The entire protocol is designed so that
To be decentralized.
the entire thing is completely, you can complete today, as it exists today, you can complete a login transaction without Mozilla ever being a party to any part of the transaction.
Cool. And my second question is, where do you see the major attack vectors? I mean, there's always, I guess, the chance of phishing, which OAuth doesn't fix, or none of these systems fix or tackle. But where do you see the attack vectors? I mean, what happens, for example, if my email address changes, kind of like what's happening with Yahoo, it gets recycled, or I lose my domain at some point and I had my email there, etc.
Right, so we believe that the attack vectors, the security model, is roughly equivalent to existing email password systems, just without the entire password compromise case in the picture. So if someone owns your email address, in terms of domain hijacking, you let something expire, you lose access to that domain in some way, then the new controller of that domain is able to masquerade as you, just as they could by going and clicking a forgot email link or forgot password link and getting that email. That's
I can make a point there where at the moment, even if people aren't using Persona, if someone gets into your email account, then basically it's over. They can do anything. So I think with Persona, it's the same situation. you have to protect your email account because that's basically your identity.
Is there any possibility to actually say, kind of like the sign out, but not a sign out, to say, well, this email address has been compromised?
So there's no way to, on a per address basis, no way to do like a revocation list. We're trying to manage that by issuing rather short duration certificates and letting those just expire and require regularly checking in with the email provider. The email provider can, if they are ever compromised, simply start publishing a new public key and start signing with a new key pair, which will immediately invalidate all of the existing certificates. So we have mitigations available for site compromises. One of the other things, speaking to the interface real quick, is that right now this is all implemented as a web form. It's fully responsive, so if you load Persona on a phone, you get a mobile optimized experience, whereas the desktop looks like that. So we're really trying to be as webby as we can about this. Yeah, sure. Question in the back. If you could move to the mic, please.
With Persona API, how you would implement forgot password scenario? Can you?
Which scenario?
Forgot password?
Forgotten password. So the way you do it with Persona is that the user uses their existing email account, their existing account credentials. So it would be the same way that you would handle forgetting your Gmail password or your Yahoo password, because that is the password that you have to recover. It's not the concern of the site anymore at that point. You take one more question.
If you have two separated Drupal installations and you use them usually together, is there a way that you log in one installation and you are logged in both installation and log out somewhere and you are logged out on both installations?
So the question is there ability to do like cross-domain single sign-on? So if you run several Drupal installations, can I sign into one and be signed into all of them? Not currently. We have a prototype of a feature that will do just that we hope to push live in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So very, very soon. One of the domains publishes a list that says, I am part of a realm with all these other domains. And then each member site also confirms and says, I am a member of this realm. And if those two things overlap and match up, then we synchronize the login state across all of them. So that is coming very soon. I think that's all the time we have. Again, please, please, please go and give us feedback and implement the module on your site. It's a couple clicks. We have stickers. We're going to be hanging out. Ask me questions. Ask Jonathan questions. Thank you so much.
Way to get information about this group feature?
Yeah, let me. That was good. Yeah. The live demo was always a bit of a lottery, but it was okay.
Yeah.
We had a couple of glitches, but
Yeah, it's all.
Just where's my email address?
It's
on
a
here?
live demo. It's
yeah.
yeah.
So thanks very much for the backup.
Wi-Fi works well, or?
Yeah, well, we're plugged
just
into the
shoot me an
cable
email.
and it was solid.